There's a sound that once haunted the battlefields of Europe, a low, heavy growl that sent chills through the hearts of Allied soldiers long before they even saw it. Some said it sounded like thunder. Others swore it was the growl of a beast, but it wasn't an animal. It was steel, German steel, the Tiger tank, the most feared machine of World War II. Imagine being a young Allied soldier crouched in the mud somewhere in North Africa or Normandy. The air is still, dust settling after the rumble of artillery. Then in the distance you hear it, the grinding roar of metal tracks and the deep hum of a Maybach engine. Your sergeant goes pale. He whispers two words no soldier ever wanted to hear: Tiger tank. That was enough to make a platoon freeze in place, not because they were cowards, but because they knew what was coming. A single Tiger could turn an entire battlefield into a slaughterhouse. Before we get into this monster's story, how it was built, why it terrified so many, and how it eventually met its downfall, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and share this with a friend who loves history as much as you do. It helps keep stories like this alive. Alright, now, let's step back to the moment the beast was born. It all started in 1941. Germany was deep into its war of conquest. Blitzkrieg had smashed through Poland, France, and much of Europe. The Wehrmacht's panzer divisions were kings of the battlefield, but then came the Eastern Front, Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, and that's where the Germans got their first nasty surprise: the Soviet T-34 tank. The T changed everything. It was fast, well-armored, and could handle rough terrain better than any German tank. German shells bounced right off its sloped armor. Even the vaunted Panzer IV, Germany's best tank at the time, struggled to destroy it. On the snowy plains outside Moscow, Hitler's commanders were stunned. For the first time, the German war machine wasn't invincible. Hitler, obsessed with technological superiority, demanded a counter. He wanted a tank that could destroy anything the enemy fielded, one that could shrug off hits and keep rolling. In typical Hitler fashion, he wanted it quickly, and he wanted it to be the best in the world. So in 1941, two German companies, Henschel and Porsche, were ordered to design what would become the Tiger. The two designs were built side by side and tested under Hitler's watchful eye in 1942. He loved tanks like a child loves toys, except his toys destroyed cities. Porsche's version was over-engineered and unreliable, while Henschel's was solid, simple, and deadly efficient. So Henschel's design won. The result was the Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger Aus. The name itself carried weight, but the machine, it was something else entirely. This thing was a fortress on tracks, 60 tons of steel with armor thick enough to make most Allied guns useless. Its front plate was 100 millimeters thick, solid, flat, unapologetic. It wasn't just strong, it looked intimidating. Its 88mm KWK-36 gun could destroy a Sherman tank from over a mile away. Think about that, a single hit, and an Allied tank would burst into flames before it even got close enough to return fire. The Tiger was so powerful it could knock out enemies long before they ever saw it. When the Tiger first appeared on the battlefield in 1942, near Leningrad, the Allies had no idea what they were facing. Reports came in from British and Soviet troops describing some kind of super tank that their shells couldn't penetrate. Soldiers called it invincible. Entire tank crews panicked and retreated at the mere rumor of a Tiger nearby. But for all its fearsome reputation, the Tiger was never meant to be mass-produced. It was too complex. Every one of its 54,000 parts had to be machined to perfection. Its suspension was a masterpiece, but a nightmare to repair. If one wheel broke, entire rows had to be removed. Mechanics cursed it daily. And yet, when it was running, the Tiger felt unstoppable. Crews loved their Tigers. They treated them like family, giving them names: Annalise, Greta, Dora. They painted kill markings on the barrels, kept them spotless, and trusted them with their lives. Inside, though, it was cramped and loud. The air stank of oil and cordite. The floor vibrated constantly, and in summer it felt like sitting inside an oven. Still, for the men inside, it was safer than being outside. The Tiger could take hits that would destroy anything else. In North Africa, under the command of Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, the Tiger made its debut to the Western Allies. Near Tunisia in 1943, American and British forces watched in disbelief as their shells simply bounced off the German beasts. Reports came flooding in: enemy tank invulnerable to all known anti-tank weapons. The legend of the Tiger was born. Imagine that for a moment. You're an American gunner in a Sherman. You see a Tiger cresting a hill. Its gun turning slowly toward you, you fire first. The shell hits the front and ricochets like a stone skipping across water. You watch your tracer vanish into the sky. Then you see the Tiger's turret stop moving. It's aimed right at you. The next sound you hear is the sharp crack of its 88mm cannon. The world turns white, and just like that, your tank and everything inside is gone. That's what the Tiger did to morale. It wasn't just a machine, it was psychological warfare. Its very presence broke the enemy's will before the battle even began. But here's the thing, the Tiger was both a masterpiece and a curse for Germany. It was powerful, yes, but it was slow, painfully slow. Its Maybach engine struggled under all that weight. It guzzled fuel like a thirsty elephant, and in the freezing mud of the Eastern Front it often bogged down. When it broke down, and it often did, it couldn't be towed by ordinary vehicles. It needed special recovery tanks, or in many cases, had to be abandoned and blown up by its own crew to keep it from falling into enemy hands. Still, when it worked, it was magnificent. One of the most famous Tiger commanders, Michael Whitman, became a legend in his own right. In one day, June 13, 1944, he destroyed over a dozen British tanks near Villers-Bocage in Normandy. It was pure chaos. The Allies thought they were ambushing the Germans. Instead, one Tiger, Whitman's Tiger, ambushed them. He took out an entire column in minutes. That story spread like wildfire. Whitman became the tank ace of Germany, and the Tiger's reputation grew even more terrifying. But as the war dragged on, the cracks in the beast began to show. By 1944, the Tiger had earned its fearsome reputation, but it was also becoming a heavy burden on Germany's already strained war machine. Every single Tiger took almost twice as long to build as a regular tank. It required the finest steel, the most skilled labor, and an immense amount of time and resources, all things Germany was running out of. Factories were being bombed, fuel supplies were drying up, and the Allies were producing tanks by the thousands. For every Tiger that rolled out of a German factory, the Americans built 10 Shermans. The Soviets built even more T-34s. The numbers were overwhelming. But numbers alone didn't tell the full story. When a Tiger appeared on the battlefield, it could hold its ground against impossible odds. There were cases where a single Tiger destroyed dozens of enemy tanks before running out of ammunition or fuel. One German commander once described the feeling as being a lion among sheep. That was the aura surrounding this machine. That for the soldiers who had to maintain it, the Tiger was both a miracle and a nightmare. The maintenance crews called it the prima donna. It needed constant care, constant tuning. If the engine overheated, it could burst into flames. Its wide tracks, designed to carry its 60 tons, were prone to jamming in the mud. Spare parts were hard to find, and moving it over long distances often required disassembling parts of it. The moment one broke down in the field, it became an immovable giant. Allied pilots began to hunt them from the sky, and many Tigers were lost not in combat with other tanks, but to mechanical failures or airstrikes while stranded on roadsides. Still, despite all that, Allied intelligence regarded the Tiger as one of the most dangerous opponents in the war. The British even captured one intact in Tunisia, nicknaming it Tiger 131. They studied it, tested it, and realized just how far ahead the Germans were in engineering. To this day, that very Tiger, the only fully operational one left, sits in the Bovington Tank Museum in England. When they start its engine, the entire building vibrates. Visitors can feel it in their chests. That's the sound of fear the soldiers once knew. Now let's pause for just a second. If you're still here, clearly you love stories like this, stories that make history come alive again. So take a moment to subscribe and hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these voices from the past alive. Alright, back to the Tiger. The Tiger's most famous moments came not in North Africa, but in the fields and villages of Eastern Europe. The Russians learned quickly how to deal with them, but in the early days it was chaos. Entire Soviet armored units were wiped out by just a few Tigers. In one battle near Kursk, Tigers spearheaded the German advance. Their 88mm guns cut through Soviet armor like paper. The battlefield turned into a graveyard of burning metal. Soviet tank crews reported that they could see their shells bouncing off the Tigers even at close range. Some panicked and fled. Others fought desperately, swarming the giants to find weak spots. But the Soviets were fast learners. They began deploying tactics that neutralized the Tiger's advantages. Instead of attacking head-on, they flanked them, using numbers and ability. They developed new weapons like the Su-152 and the Is-2 heavy tank, both capable of piercing the Tiger's armor. It was no longer a game of one unstoppable machine. It became a test of endurance and production. The Tiger's thick armor and powerful gun gave it unmatched strength in duels, but it came at a price. It couldn't move quickly across bridges. Many collapsed under its weight. It couldn't easily retreat or change position. Once it was committed to a fight, it was all in. And when the Allies began coordinating air attacks with ground offensives, the Tiger became an easier target. No armor, no matter how thick, could withstand a direct hit from above. Still, the Germans clung to their Tigers. To them, it wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of strength in the face of overwhelming odds. Even as Germany's situation worsened, Hitler demanded more Tigers, more advanced versions, heavier armor, bigger guns. That obsession gave birth to the Tiger II, also known as the King Tiger. It was even larger, heavier, and deadlier, but also slower, hungrier for fuel, and even harder to maintain. It was a beast designed for a war Germany could no longer afford to fight. Meanwhile, the Allied soldiers learned how to fight the Tiger. They stopped wasting shells on its front armor and aimed for the sides and rear. Infantry learned to use anti-tank weapons up close, slipping behind cover, sneaking through smoke, and striking from the flanks. Artillery units coordinated better, drawing the Tigers into kill zones where multiple guns could concentrate fire. The once invincible monster was finally starting to bleed. Even the weather turned against it. In the harsh winters of Russia, oil thickened, gears froze, engines stalled. Many Tigers were abandoned in the snow, their crews forced to blow them up to prevent capture. In muddy seasons, they sank and never moved again. The mighty Tiger that had once ruled the desert and the plains now struggled to survive in its own homeland. And yet, despite all the flaws, despite the breakdowns and the shortages, Allied soldiers continued to fear the Tiger till the very end of the war. It had become more than just a tank, it was a legend, a ghost in the fog of war. Many times, Allied reports claimed to have encountered a Tiger when in fact, it was just a smaller German tank. That's how deep the psychological impact ran. The very word Tiger was enough to cause panic. By 1945, as Germany collapsed and the Allies closed in from both east and west, Tigers still fought fiercely in defense of the Reich. They held crossroads, bridges, and towns with desperate determination. Many were lost in place, fighting to the last shell. Some commanders refused to abandon their tanks even when surrounded. They went down with them, turning the battlefield into a funeral pyre of steel. One Allied tanker later recalled finding a destroyed Tiger outside a small German village. The tank was burnt out, its turret blown off, and inside they found the crew, still at their stations, frozen in time. He said, "They fought like lions, but they were men, not machines." When the war finally drew to its brutal close in 1945, the last of the Tigers lay scattered across Europe, some buried in mud, others burned out beside roads, their once mighty frames torn apart by artillery or airstrikes. They were monsters reduced to carcasses, silent reminders of how even the most feared machines eventually fall, but their legend didn't die with them. Soldiers on every side carried stories home, tales of impossible duels, of shells bouncing off armor, of the deep, bone-shaking rumble that made hearts pound and prayers spill out in whispers. To the Allies, the Tiger became a symbol of German engineering, terrifying, precise, but ultimately self-defeating. To the Germans, it was pride and tragedy rolled into one. It represented their brilliance and their blindness. The Tiger was everything the Nazi war machine stood for, technological genius chasing impossible perfection while the world burned around it. But the human side of this story is just as haunting. Every Tiger had a crew, 5 men who lived and fought together in a space smaller than a kitchen. The driver hunched low, staring through a narrow slit. The radio operator, one hand on the trigger of his machine gun. The gunner, calm and focused, aligning the 88mm with surgical precision. The loader, sweating under pressure, shells stacked around him like iron tombstones. And the commander, peering through his cupola, trying to read chaos and turn it into victory. They were skilled, disciplined, and often heartbreakingly young. Many didn't make it home. Those who survived carried memories that never left them. Some spoke of the power, how unstoppable they felt inside that armored beast. Others spoke of fear, how one mistake, one ambush could turn their indestructible world into a coffin. Even inside a Tiger, they learned that no armor was thick enough tea. Oh, protect a man from fate. After the war, Allied engineers tore apart captured Tigers, studying every bolt and bearing. They admired its precision but shook their heads at its complexity. It was too heavy, too costly, too delicate for the brutal demands of modern war. The Allies, by contrast, had focused on practicality, machines that could be built fast, repaired anywhere, and replaced easily. That difference in philosophy might have won them the war as much as any battlefield victory. Still, the Tiger's legacy lived on. Post-war tank designs across the world drew lessons from it. Its gun, its armor layout, its internal systems, they all influenced the next generation of armored warfare. Even today, ask any tank historian or veteran which machine they think best captured the spirit of World War II, and most will still say, the Tiger. It was flawed, yes, but it was unforgettable. If you've been listening this long, you're clearly part of that small group who still cares about the stories behind the steel, the people, the fear, the courage. So before we continue, take a second to subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, share it with someone who loves history, and help keep these stories alive for another generation. Alright, let's finish the journey of the Tiger. When Germany fell, many Tigers were destroyed where they stood. The Allies blew them up, scrapped them, melted them down for metal. Out of the 1,300 or so Tigers built, only a handful survived. Most were lost to time and rust, but those that remain, those that museums keep alive, still have that same aura. When you stand next to one, even now, it feels like it's watching you back. Its size, its lines, its silence, they speak of a time when men built monsters to fight their wars. In the end, the tiger wasn't beaten because it was weak. It was beaten because the world changed faster than it could keep up. It was a masterpiece trapped in a collapsing empire, a weapon built for domination but born into desperation. For every tiger that rolled out, 100 Allied tanks rolled in. For every victory it claimed, the tide of war kept turning. You could destroy a column of Shermans, but you couldn't stop the factories that made them. You could terrify a regiment, but you couldn't hold back a nation's resolve. Somewhere on the fields of Normandy, the ruins of a tiger still lie buried under the soil. Farmers plow around it. Children play nearby, unaware that beneath their feet sleeps what was once the most feared machine on earth. Nature reclaims everything, even legends. But the stories remain. Veterans still spoke of that moment, the first time they saw one, the sound it made, the fear that crept up their spine. For a split second, they saw what humanity was capable of when brilliance meets obsession. And in that reflection, there's a strange lesson. Technology can give power, but it can't win wars alone. It's men, their choices, their courage, their mistakes that decide the course of history. Today, when the Bovington tiger roars to life, crowds gather. Cameras roll. The ground trembles. It's not just an old machine running, it's history breathing again. People cover their ears, children stare wide-eyed, and old soldiers sometimes wipe away tears. Because that sound, that deep rumble, carries with it echoes of an entire generation, of young men who lived, fought, and died in the shadow of a steel beast. The Tiger tank may have ruled the early battles, but it couldn't conquer time. What it left behind was something more powerful than any weapon: respect. Even its enemies admitted it. The Tiger demanded it, not just because of its firepower, but because of the men who operated it, the opponents who faced it, and the sheer audacity of its creation. And that's how history remembers the tiger, not merely as Germany's beast of war, but as a symbol of the era itself. A time when courage met fear, when innovation clashed with necessity, and when humanity learned once again that every machine, no matter how mighty, is only as strong as the hands and the hearts behind it. The tiger rests now, silent and cold, its steel slowly aging in museums and forgotten fields. But the spirit it carried, the drive to build something unmatched, the will to fight against impossible odds, that still lives on, buried somewhere deep within the human story. Because even in war, even in the darkest times, there's always that spark of human brilliance, and sometimes that brilliance builds a beast.